Insurance isn't one size fits all, and shopping for it shouldn't feel like squeezing into something that just doesn't fit. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they show you options that fit your budget. Enough hunting for discounts, trying to calculate rates, and tinkering with coverages. Maybe you're picking out your very first policy, or maybe you're just looking for something that works better for you and your family. Either way, they make it simple to see your options. No guesswork, no surprises. Ready to see how easy and fun shopping for car insurance can be? Visit Progressive.com and give the Name Your Price tool a try. Take the stress out of shopping and find coverage that fits your life, on your terms. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Cocktails up here feel just right. Is Cambria amazing? All right. Bring a date, your team, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com. See you on the roof.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 824 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. It's Thursday, May 14th, 2026. We have a couple of things we're going to talk about today. We have some scheduling updates, and we also are going to talk about the NBA Draft Combine and also the draft order because we didn't get a chance to discuss all of that before. I'm Donald Juan. I'm your host for this episode. It's not a bunch of us today. It's just Jason and I. So, Jason, I'm sorry. I'm your only company today.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm used to this, and I'm perfectly happy with you as my company for the day. Hey, can I give a quick shout out at the top? I neglected when we recorded over the weekend or earlier this week, I should say. I neglected to shout out a couple guys, Malik Brown and Rodney Hood, who walked in graduation for Duke just a few days ago. Now I know there's some graduate guys, but in terms of graduating from the main university, Malik Brown earned his Duke degree, and so did Rodney Hood. Rodney came back, after playing in the NBA for close to a decade. And we've mentioned this before, like back in December. I think he technically graduated in December. He just walked at this point. And we talked about it in the past. But again, I just love so much these guys who, when they get done earning, 10, 20, 30 plus, whatever $1 million it is in their NBA careers, as Rodney, I haven't even looked up how much Rodney probably made more than $30 million in his NBA career. When they get done with their NBA career, they go, you know what? Wait, I want to keep on educating myself, and I want to be a Duke graduate. And I just think it's such a fabulous and wonderful thing. It's worth noting that, like, Rodney's mother was a school principal in Mississippi. I'm sure that she was like, son, you're finishing. You played that basketball. Okay. I'm a school principal. You're getting your degree. And I think it's also interesting that when Rodney came back to get his degree, he said that when it was done with that, when he was finished with that, he wanted to maybe get into coaching. Look, I'm just, I don't know. John's got an opening on the staff. I mean, probably not for Rodney Hood, but I just love it whenever any of these guys get into coaching, especially the ones who have great experience in the NBA.
Well, I also love the fact, first of all, congratulations to them both. I don't think in the pictures and the videos, I don't think I've seen Malik smile more in 2 years than he did in that 30-second video of him at graduation, which is definitely warranted. I'm sure he's proud of it. I know we as a fan base are proud of them for graduating, but also with Rodney Hood, it's just the latest in a line of guys who have gone to the NBA, done other things, and come back and finish the degree. We remember when Carlos Boozer had just finished his degree a couple of years ago. Will Avery finished his degree a couple of years ago, and it's just proof positive that education doesn't have an expiration date, doesn't have an eligibility requirement. You can finish whenever you're ready. And the fact that these guys are still paying it to themselves and honestly paying back a lot of people that have gotten them to the point that they did by getting that degree, by going off and doing things in the NBA, and in the case of Carlos Boozer being a Hall of Famer, with the 2008 Redeem team, being a Hall of Famer, and then saying, okay, let me come back and finish my degree, setting the example for his kids, and for his parents and for his family. Like, I love the fact that these guys are coming back and taking the time to finish out their education. So congratulations to both of them. I think that is a tremendous accomplishment. And of course it is, Jason. You and I both know what that feels like to be able to walk at graduation at Duke University, of all places. And sure, a lot of people out there do as well. And it brings back a lot of warm memories. So congratulations to them. Let's talk about the 2026-27 Blue Devils, because over the past couple of days, we got a couple of scheduling updates for the men and some of the games that they're going to play. One of them is a very big one. It's a home and home, and it is against Illinois, which I don't think was really something that we had thought about. But when you look at it on paper, this is an incredible home and home series that's being set up. The first game will be on November 17th. That will take place in Cameron. They will then play on December 4th of 2027. So for the 27-28 season, they will play that at the State Farm Center in Champaign, Illinois. Jason, your thoughts on Illinois being one of the big-time teams that will be coming to Cameron this season?
I mean, obviously, it is super exciting to see Duke taking on, once again, lining up one of the toughest non-conference schedules in the country. And you love to see some of these games at the home and homes. I know that schools make more money. This is just reality. They make more money when they do these, these special neutral court kind of games, which the whole Amazon Prime deal that Duke is doing, maybe with Michigan, but with Gonzaga and UConn, that whole Amazon Prime thing, Duke's going to make more money off of that than they do off of a game in Cameron. It's just the reality of ticket sales and all kinds of other stuff like that. That said, there are people who pay very, very, very stiff premiums to the Iron Dukes to be able to get tickets to Duke basketball games in Cameron. And obviously that comes with a bunch of fabulous ACC games, but I think it's also nice that it come with, at least occasionally, a prominent non-conference game. And so I'm elated to have Illinois there. Illinois appears to be, by all accounts, look, nothing's final, nothing's finished yet, but a preseason top 5 team, like maybe preseason top 3. They are right up there with the very best. They have a program that has been on top for a while now. Pretty much you can book them to be an annual Final Four contender in the NIL era. And this is who you want Duke to test themselves against. This is a team that, you're pretty likely to see in the NCAA tournament. Not early, but very, very late. So, yeah, exactly. Last year we had Florida coming into Cameron in the ACC SEC Challenge. We will not be getting a home game in the ACC SEC Challenge this year. So, hey, let's bring in someone else in the top 5 who we can play in Cameron. There's nothing to be gained but good stuff out of a game like this.
Yeah, it's the second home and home that we have set up for the season. Obviously, the Army return game I know is not as high profile as this one, but again, we're scheduling these games where we have, going on the road, going to, home, visiting courts. I think that's terrific. Jason, I will say very jokingly that I really hope that Illinois cleared everything with the Big Ten, because apparently that's a big deal now. So hopefully they have talked it over. And ESPN can host this game in Cameron, and then Fox can do what they want with the game in Champaign next year. Hopefully those P's and Q's are crossed and we don't have multiple things. But I also think, again, when you're looking at some of these teams that a lot of people are thinking are going to be among the top in the country, we're scheduling them. Everyone in the top 10's on notice. We'll beat you, right? And I think that is that's a cool thing. You mentioned the ACC SEC Challenge because we've been on. I think we've talked about this, but you have to be. Every team is on the road twice and at home twice over the course of a 4-year period. We have been on the road just once in this 4-year period, this first 4-year period. So we will be on the road this year. Who knows? Could be Florida, but could be somebody else. And whatever happens with this game with Michigan, if the Big Ten really raises enough of a stink and Fox raises enough of the stink that they have to be replaced. Who knows who we would go after in that result? I would say probably another team in the SEC that would be lined up if that were the case. But as of right now, that's not really being discussed. But I love the fact that Illinois, it's not going to be that 43-point blowout that we had at the Garden. We're not expecting that this time around. It's going to be obviously a much different team. We don't have Spencer Hubbard, so there's no theatrics there. But I really think this is going to be a game for the ages, and I'm also looking forward to the game in Champaign next year. So, Jason, your last word on the Illinois portion of this before we move on.
Well, I don't know. Or do we want to move on to like other potential scheduling stuff? Because I was going to mention that there's lots of talk. It hasn't been announced yet, but I think we sort of know at this point that Duke is going to be playing Tennessee also in Cameron. As long as we're talking about games happening in Cameron in an exhibition game. As you will recall, we did the same thing. We went to Tennessee to play an exhibition game at their place last year. And at the time, we sort of thought there probably would be a return game. It hasn't been officially announced, but there are a lot of people talking about it. I think it's all but officially announced. And yeah, I love the fact, by the way, we're talking about big regular season games. Clearly, exhibition season is also time for big time opponents, and I like us getting Tennessee as well.
Yeah, I think I know when we discussed the Tennessee game last year, the exhibition, we had talked about the fact that there was even rumblings back then that it would be exhibition home and home, so to speak, and Tennessee would get their chance to come to Cameron for an exhibition. So I really like that. I assume, I haven't heard anything, but I assume that the Brotherhood run is going to happen in some form, whether it's in the last year we had it in both the preseason and the regular season. I don't know if it's going to happen in one or the other or both, but we imagine that in some form it's going to resume this year as well. Jason, another game that has been scheduled for Cameron is on November 5th. We will be taking on Coastal Carolina. The Chanticleers will come to Cameron out of the Sun Belt Conference. Jason, we talk about the big ones, and in the case of Army and in the case of Coastal Carolina, these are some of these games that we will probably have in between. I will note that this game I mentioned is on November 5th. That is the Thursday on the first week of the season. There is an opportunity there. I'm not certain, but there is an opening there for that Monday when games can start for Duke to have a game, a neutral site game of some sort, or even a bigger game to open up the season like they did with Texas last year. So again, your thoughts on the Chanticleers? They were 247th at KenPom this past season, middle of the road at the Sun Belt. But again, you can't. I'm sure people would love for us to face every top 20 team in America in a non-conference schedule. That's just not how that works.
No, and yeah, like you said, they're barely a top 250 team in college basketball. But yeah, you've got to, especially early in the year, you need time to figure things out and identify who's doing what and how it's working and such. It's functionally kind of a glorified exhibition, but no, I'm fine to see this. And by the way, I will address. I can't imagine it. It's sort of unfathomable to me that Duke won't play on like one of the first 2 days of the season. You mentioned this game's on a Thursday. We're gonna be playing on Monday or Tuesday. I'm almost certain of it. My bet would be we'll play on Monday. And
that's my bet.
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably a high profile opponent. I think the way John Shire puts together the schedule, he's not going to want to start with 2 gimme games. I'm not sure that you learn a tremendous amount off that. I think it makes a lot of sense after the exhibition season, which will be challenging probably, that you would play a tough opponent out of the right out of the blocks, and then okay, let's now see what we need to work on against a team like a Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you open up against a high-profile team of some sort to start the season, you then have, at this point, we have Coastal Carolina. We then have, again, that game in Cameron against Army, which is supposed to be slated around Veterans Day like it was last year. Then you have the Champions Classic, which will be Michigan State this year. You then have the game against Illinois. So I think it's kind of setting itself up to be kind of a little pendulum swing. We may throw a game. I'm sure we'll throw a game in between the Illinois game and when we go to Vegas for the UConn game. So the schedule's in flux, but we're starting to get some of these pieces that feel like they're starting to come together. And I think for a lot of fans, that's the exciting part, is kind of seeing how this schedule comes together. We're recording this on May 14th. Like the NFL schedule is coming together tonight. Like everyone's being announced. So like it's schedule talk is always easy to do because people love debating about whose schedule is the strongest, what teams we're playing, where they're going. And in the case of Duke, we have it all. So let's take a quick. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So really quick, I was just going to say, just as a reminder from this past season, because I think it is instructive in terms of what Shire will probably try and build this year. We opened with the tough game with Texas. It wasn't like a murderer's row kind of game, but Texas is a top 25, top 30 kind of club. And then Duke we had 3 games in a row against lower tier. We did Western Carolina, Army, and Indiana State. I suspect you'll see something kind of similar to that. And then after that, it ratchets up a bit. We had the Champions Classic, a couple other easier games. And then we did Arkansas, Florida, and Michigan State all in a row right after Thanksgiving. It was just right around Thanksgiving and soon after. It was a really, really tough stretch. My bet is that Shire will try and kind of build the same kind of thing, like tough game and take a couple games, figure some things out, then maybe another tough game, take a couple games, and then go into a really tough stretch. So he knows what he's doing, that Jon Scheyer guy.
Yeah, and I think it's great in the sense of, we had the Brotherhood run, which was right before we went to Chicago. So again, there's plenty of opportunities here to kind of throw some of these games in here and make this schedule look strong, but also give guys opportunities to really figure out some of the combinations they're going to use throughout the rest of the season.
Well, and the last thing is to remind everyone, Duke won't win all these games. I know the roster is stacked. I know we're all incredibly optimistic. We're probably going to be a preseason 1, 2, 3, somewhere in that kind of ballpark, depending on some different decisions and things like that happen, and recruiting finishing up and whatever else. But I think Duke was very, very fortunate this year that the only non-conference game we lost was that game against Texas Tech, until you obviously get to the NCAA tournament. We did better, Donald, in the non-conference last year than I think anyone reasonably expected.
Correct.
We have a super tough schedule that John's setting up. He's basically playing like everybody in the top 5, not named Duke. Pending what happens with Florida, and there's a chance the SEC challenges up. But anyway, I'll go ahead and say it. I think it's fairly likely that Duke won't do as well in the non-conference next year. The team may be better, but just the luck of the draw and just playing all those tough teams, we may not do better in our non-conference schedule than we did this past season.
Well, it's hard to do better because we'd have to go undefeated. So
exactly.
But I will say this last point on this is anybody out there, if you've seen a plume of smoke, it is not thick enough for John to duck. He ducks no smoke. Yeah. He accepts all challenges, and this is going to be no exception. Let's take a quick break. And on the other side, we're going to talk about the NBA draft. We're going to talk about the order. We're going to talk about some things we've seen from the NBA draft combine involving players that are either entering the draft for Duke or guys who are coming to Duke in the case of John Blackwell. So stick around. We're going to talk about NBA draft after this. All right, we are back. We turn our attention from the schedule to the future of some of our Duke Brotherhood athletes in the NBA. Of course, first of all, Jason, really quickly before we get to the draft combine, we should talk about the NBA draft lottery, which took place earlier this week, or I guess it was on Sunday. And the Washington Wizards, at least for my hometown Washington Wizards, they win the 1 pick. I believe it's the first time ever that they've won in the modern draft lottery era, that they've won the 1 pick. They've had a lot of seasons where they've been terrible. But now I think people have figured out the formula. Until now, we talk about tanking all the time, right? And they've changed the rules with regards to tanking, but the Wizards have figured out the secret. Trade for Anthony Davis. You get the 1 pick. He has been traded 3 times in his career. The team who has traded him has ended up with the 1 pick, or a team has traded for him. In the case of the Wizards and the Mavericks. So, Jason, Wizards, Jazz, Grizzlies, Bulls, Clippers, those are your top 5. We're going to talk more about the draft and what where we think guys might go. But your initial thoughts on the top five, and of course where Cam Boozer might slide into, I guess sounds like Memphis.
Well, it's kind of hard to talk. I mean, yeah, people peg him to Memphis at the number 3 pick. I think anyone who tells you that they know who's going 1, 2, 3, 4 is someone who's making assumptions that have not been decided yet. I think there are 3, possibly 4 really, really great prospects in this draft. And I don't know that anything is decided among those 4 guys because, and this segues us into the draft combine. Cameron Boozer is having a really, really good combine. Like his measurables. Yeah. Like, the book on him was that, he's not going to be as fast or as explosive or as athletic as some of these other guys. His measurables, his anthros, as they call them and the such, his wingspan and, leaping, all the other kind of things. I think they're showing a little better than people expected. He did the shooting drills. Some of his shooting drills were incredible, like really, really strong numbers from 3-point range on certain types of shots and the such. If you're an NBA scout and you've just decided, oh yeah, for sure, Cam Boozer's not going 1 or 2, your GM needs to talk to you. If you're the guy with the number 1 or number 2 pick, you've got to think about Cameron Boozer. I'm remembering back to a few years ago when everyone said Paolo Banchero was going 3rd. It's like, yeah, Paolo's going 3rd. And then on the night of the draft, Paolo went number 1. And if you go back and redraft that draft, Paolo's going number 1.
Yes.
In retrospect, Orlando made the right call. I don't know what's going to happen with Cam. Everyone says highest floor, but not highest ceiling. Sometimes highest floor is a pretty good thing. And I think his floor is super high. This dude wins everywhere he goes. He impacts winning everywhere he goes. It looks like he gets better and better every season. Again, the combine numbers don't give you anything to question about him. If I had the number 1 pick, it'd be hard for me to pass up on a guy like this. What's Cam? Isn't Cam Boozer's floor an NBA All-Star? Isn't that his floor? I can't imagine that's not his floor.
Well, I think, we were talking the other day and we talked about the Paolo draft comparison and how in 2022, literally like what it was like an hour and a half before the draft, people were like, wow, the odds of Paolo going number 1 have shrunk mightily. Someone knows something, and it was the Magic saying, yes, we are going to draft this guy number 1. And there's a lot of parallels to this because in a draft of, highly touted freshmen, he's one of the best. But even as the player of the year, consensus national player of the year, everyone's looking at, AJ DeBonsa as the number 1 pick, Darren Peterson as the number 2 pick. But I think the one thing that I've seen come out of this and watching the combine stuff over the past few days, the best thing to happen to Cam Boozer is everyone going, oh, wow, he's a little bit more athletic than I thought he was. Because everyone saw how great he did and he was viewed as unathletic. And when you compare him to the athletic guys in that presumed top 5, like a Caleb Wilson, like an AJ DeBonsa, he was beating them in all these agility drills. He was beating them in the shooting drills. And I think that is where a lot of people, I think we had this scenario, we kind of talked it out. So I'm going to tell everybody what we talked out. It was, I could see a situation where AJ DeBonsa does not go number 1. I can see that. I don't think it's likely, but I can see it. What I also can see is somebody saying, hey, if Cam is going to be there at number 3 and the Jazz will take one of our superstars that we have for the number 2 pick, maybe we trade up and take Cam number 2 and use that as the focal point of our offense. I can see somebody doing that as well. Or someone, or if it's the Wizards going, you know what, we think Cam Boozer is the best player in this draft, maybe not even taking him number 1, maybe figuring out a way to trade back a spot or 2 to get Cam at that 2 spot and still get something for somebody drafting AJ DeBonsa. There's a lot of scenarios that are in place, but one thing is for certain coming out of this combine, at least for me, is that a lot of people understand now that Cam Boozer is way more athletic than they let on. And the fact that he is out athleticizing all the athletic guys in the presumed top five of this draft lets me know that we all saw what we saw this year. That man is the best player in the country.
A few years ago, a gentleman by the name of Danny Ainge was in charge of the Boston Celtics. And Danny Ainge looked at the draft. The Celtics had the number one pick in the draft. He looked at that draft and he went, you know who's the best guy in this draft? You know who I want more than anyone else? I want that kid from Duke, Jason Tatum. And Danny Ainge looked at that draft and looked at the other GMs in that draft, and he went, you know, I think I can get Tatum. I could get him number one, of course, but I think I can get him at number 3. In fact, I'm sure I can get him at number 3. And Danny Ainge made a trade with the Philadelphia 76ers. And the 76ers moved up to number 1, and they gave Danny Ainge some other asset. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they gave him some other stuff. They gave him some other stuff, and Danny Ainge moved back to number 3. And Philadelphia used that number 1 pick to take Markelle Fultz. And Danny Ainge sat there at number 3 and took Jason Tatum. Danny Ainge is now the general manager, or the CEO, I should say, of the Utah Jazz.
Yep.
Utah Jazz picking number 2. If Danny Ainge decides, Cameron Boozer, I think he's the best player in this draft, I would not put it past Danny Ainge to go ahead and, make a trade to the number 3 team or something like that.
We call that
finessing. You want to
finessing.
flip spots with me?
Danny Ainge finessing the rest of the NBA is a time-honored tradition.
Exactly. I should also note, in addition to Danny Ainge being the Utah Jazz CEO, do you know who Utah employs as a scout? A gentleman by the name of Carlos Boozer. Carlos Boozer is literally at the combine this week scouting his son.
I love it, and it's going to be. I hope it's like Bubba Cunningham on the NCAA committee. Yeah, guys, I'm going to leave the room while you talk about my son. I'll be over here. Y'all need anything while I'm out? Y'all need coffee, cupcakes, something? I'll be back. Y'all talk, and then just walk out the room, and people go, "We should take his son." But and also they have. I mean, Kyle Filipowski's on the Jazz, so they have. Wojo was in the system as well, right? He was wasn't he coaching the G League team for a while?
Yeah,
or is he still?
I don't remember exactly, but yes,
they're Duke. I mean,
so.
Obviously, there's brotherhood connections everywhere, but the Jazz have some heavy connections, and of course, Danny Ainge really taking a kinding to Duke players. I don't know if I want to see him in Utah. I think the other thing that's kind of throwing kind of the question mark here is AJ DeBonsa, who was paid a lot of money to go to Utah Prep, to then go to BYU, and Utah fans are like, I know we're the number 2 pick, but bruh, go get our boy and bring him back. There's maybe some, I don't know if there's pressure to do that. There's a lot of questions entering this, but it's also just the fact that all these guys, it might be just based on, there's no one guy who I think is leaps and bounds above everybody else. Everyone's about even in different ways, and it's about maybe need of what the team feels like they need and who they think they can build around.
And so, Utah power forward is not. They've got
Kyle.
They've got Lauri Markkanen. They've got Kyle Filipowski and Lauri Markkanen at power forward. Although there's a lot of people now saying just with his size and skills and such that you could maybe play Cam as a slightly small 4, but I know need matters, but when you're picking at the very, very top of a draft, especially like this one, you're sort of like, I'm just getting the best guy. I'm getting the best guy, and we'll figure out the need later on.
Correct.
These guys can switch and move around positions and such a lot as well. So anyway,
enough on
Cam. There are other guys we need to talk about at the combine.
The Wizards need everything. The Jazz need everything, and so do the Grizzlies. So, Jason, let's move on to Isaiah Evans because he's the guy that we expect to go second among the Blue Devils in there. Again, his measurables a little, maybe, I mean, everyone's measured barefoot, so we see a lot of these height measurements come down a bit. But 6'5.5", like that's about right. Like he was listed at 6'7" with shoes on, so most people take off an inch for your shoes. That's about where he was at, and his wingspan, his standing reach, all size, very, very sizable measurements. And I think nobody's saying that this guy's undersized at all. But what have we seen from him at this combine so far? He didn't participate in a ton of the drills, but at least he's out there getting the measurables and talking to teams. And I know the Mavericks were talking to him about potentially, a potential reunification with Cooper Flagg. So they've talked about him. They talked with Malik Brown, who we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, Isaiah's stuff that he's got at the combine, the shooting numbers and the measurables and the such, just reinforce what everyone's already known, which is that he's long. He has decent, good size for an NBA wing, and he is able to perform in terms of his skills at do the kind of things that you would expect an NBA wing to do. I don't know that folks are looking at Isaiah. I would say that his combine stuff has reinforced the notion that he is a first-round draft pick, probably going in the 20s. Not in the lottery, but not at the very end of the first round. I think in the mid to low 20s. I know there's been some talk. The Atlanta Hawks have the 23rd pick. I've heard some buzz around Atlanta that Atlanta's one of the teams that's very interested in Isaiah. I don't know that anyone is necessarily going to project Isaiah as an immediate starter in the NBA. I think once you get out of like the top 10 or so picks, there are not a lot of guys who project to be immediate starters. But I think that everyone does look at Isaiah and his absolutely elite shot making, as well as a very improved defense that he showed at Duke. I think people look at those things and they go, "This is a guy who will be a 3-and-D, maybe even better than just a typical 3-and-D kind of wing in the NBA." And those things are very, very valuable. And there's nothing that's happened at the combine that has given anyone, I think, any doubts about that. The other thing we should mention about Isaiah is that he has stated that he's all in on the draft. He has no plans to come back to Duke. I think you and I've known that for quite some time. I guess there were some people out there who were like, "Oh, maybe. Well, I'm wondering, huh?" No, it's not happening. And Isaiah has stated pretty definitively that he has no plans to withdraw from the draft. He's staying in, and I expect he'll be picked somewhere between 20 and 26, 27.
Yeah, I mean, first off, there was nothing in his statements and Duke's statements that should have left any door open for him to come back. That's, I mean, if you want to dream, that's cool, but I think he's where he's supposed to be, and as you said, he's performing the way that we think he's going to perform. Jason, the Hawks have a couple of picks, right? They have the 8th pick, and they have that pick at 23. My Pistons draft 2 spots before you at 21. And so Isaiah Evans, I'm looking, maybe will end up on one of our teams. I think that'd be great because I think both teams could use a guy who could shoot the 3, get hot from 3, and also provide some defense, and even just slashing on that second unit to start, because I think both teams have enough guys. And in case of Pistons, we do have guys where he doesn't have to walk in and feel like he has to be the man immediately. He can work his way into the rotation and be able to provide. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where he ends up on draft night. The third guy that we want to talk about, Jason, is Malik Brown. Malik Brown measurements were about where you expected them to be. His 3/4 court sprint was one of the fastest in his little unit.
Yeah.
And he's been performing well in a lot of the scrimmages as well. So Jason, I mean, obviously we're high on him initially, and I know we'll talk a little bit about it later. From what I've seen, it feels like this is a guy who a lot of teams are looking at and saying, yes, this is a guy we can take in the second round.
Yeah, I think, again, Malik's measurables aren't going to jump off the page all that much, but they show that he has the size and other, agility and all those other kind of things that would make him someone capable of being effective in the NBA. I think with Malik, you're mostly watching the tape of him at Duke and just, jaw on the floor. How can I not think that this guy wouldn't be able to cause a little bit of havoc on defense, against other NBA players? He's done better, Donald, by the way, in the scrimmages, I think, than people might have expected. In the first scrimmage that he played in, he did not start for his team. And we should note, by the way, for folks who don't understand the scrimmages at the NBA Combine, the guys who are assured of being first-round picks are not the guys participating in the scrimmages.
Correct.
Ain't no way that Cameron Boozer or those other guys, even Isaiah Evans isn't participating in the scrimmages. It's the guys who are trying to get into basically the second round, or maybe play their way from, early second round into being a late first round pick. Those are the guys who play in the scrimmages. Well, Malik had his first scrimmage. He was great. He was 4 of 4 from the field. He hit the only 3-pointer he took. He scored 12 points. He had 4 rebounds total. I apologize. I'm reading my things wrong. And he just looked, like the typical Malik Brown, slapping balls away and all that other kind of stuff.
He had 2 blocks and a steal, I want to say, too.
Yeah. No, he wasn't quite as good in the second game that they played. In that second game, wait a second, I got to find it. I had it here a second ago. Damn it. In the second game, he also went 4 for 4 from the field. He only scored 8 points. He had 7 rebounds. He didn't have any blocks or steals in that game, unfortunately. But Malik looks like someone who, he's going to pick up some sort of junk points for you every here and there. And the defense is going to be outstanding. He's on the cusp of being a guy who's going to get drafted. I don't think you're going to see Malik taken in the first half of the second round, but once you get into the 40s, I think teams are going to be very tempted to take him. And I think it's highly likely Malik's going to sign like a 2-way deal with a NBA team, which means you make about 50% of the NBA salary. And my bet is, there are going to be a lot of teams very, very interested in him as you get further along in that second round.
I think they should be. Again, Rose, do cover glasses on, but this man is the NABC National Defensive Player of the Year, like ACC Defensive Player of the Year, 6th Man of the Year. He can provide it all. And I think the funny thing is when I look at him in the NBA, this is not a direct comparison, but I see a lot of Javonte Green or Paul Reed, B-ball Paul in him, where he could come off the bench and provide a spark, not necessarily with offense, but with defense. And in the NBA, that is something that is becoming more and more coveted as everybody becomes more pass happy and shoot happy. You need guys who are going to be able to defend that. And now you've seen teams where they get a taste for what it was like back in the 2000s when teams would score like 70, 80 points in a game and feel confident that they could win that game. They want guys who can be on the block and really defend anybody 1 through 5, and that is Malik Brown more than anybody in that bottom half of the draft, if you ask me. Jason, let's go on to the final player, and that is John Blackwell. Now, of course, John Blackwell is supposed to be a current Duke player, and when he committed to Duke through the transfer portal, it was told back then that he was going to go through the NBA draft combine process. So he is doing that today, or at least this week, and let's talk about his measurements. Let's talk about, I believe he participated in the scrimmage.
He's yes.
So
I got all the numbers.
Yeah, let's start with the measurements, because I think it's a night and day, Jekyll and Hyde type of thing when you talk about the measurements versus how he's looked on the floor.
Yeah, John Blackwell's measurements are a real problem for him in terms of having an NBA future, or at least at the moment, his NBA draft stock. He measured at 6'3¼ height, which is, it's fine. It's right, or that's what an NBA point guard should be. An NBA wing, they want those guys to be more like, the 6'5" kind of range. So a little bit again, 6'3¼ a little undersized for an NBA wing. But the wingspan, he measured 6'2¼ for his wingspan. Again, a negative wingspan to height, which is very rare among NBA prospects. 6'2¼ for his wingspan. There are 70-something guys at the combine, I think. That's the worst of anyone there. There literally is not another player at the combine whose wingspan was less than the 6'2¼ that John Blackwell measured. I looked last year. There was only one player in last year's draft who was smaller than 6'2¼ in terms of his wingspan. That was Mark Sears, the former point guard from Alabama, who's only 6 feet tall. For a guy to be 6'3¼ and measure 6'2¼ on their wingspan, if you're an NBA scout, that's a terrifying number. And the reason is, if you don't have a big wingspan, it's harder to play good defense. You just can't get your arms in the way as much. It's also harder to get off your shots. Guys who are longer than you are able to stretch and bother your shot more if your wingspan isn't as much. His other athletic measurements, I'm not going to get into all the exact numbers. They were fine. None of it was great. His vertical leap was pretty poor. I mean, he's not an explosive athlete. His vertical leap wasn't that great. His speed was good, especially his 3/4 court speed. They measure, running up and down the court. They measure 3/4 court speed, like sprint. That number was pretty strong. He was like top 10 or so in the combine. So that number was really strong. But most of the other measurables on him, man, they were not good. And I think that a lot of people after that happened sort of went, the idea that this guy is going to get drafted at all, if he stayed in the draft, they were like, this guy is not draftable. That was, I think, a lot of the consensus coming out of this.
Yeah, and to clarify, I think what people are looking at when they look at these measurements are they're looking at a guy who measures as an NBA point guard. That is a position that we've talked about. He did not play at Wisconsin, and he is kind of coming to Duke to show that he can play the point guard position, because that is what he translates to in the NBA. So those measurements kind of confirm that, hey, as a shooting guard, he is, not as long, not nearly as long, and not nearly as tall as he could be, or as guys in the NBA could be. And that is going to affect how he plays at the 2. Now, at the 1, they're probably thinking, yeah, he's fine. He's still kind of a pretty tall point guard, but he needs to showcase those point guard skills. So now let's talk about what he did on the court, which I think, again, when you look at the measurements, you look at what you see in the court, you go, okay, now we see what we're getting here.
Yeah, exactly. So, we go from the measurables to what he did in the actual scrimmages. And again, the scrimmages are not guys who are expected to be first-round draft picks. We've only seen one scrimmage from him. He's actually playing the second scrimmage literally right now as you and I speak. Maybe we should have, if we'd waited another hour or two to record this podcast, we'd know his numbers from the second scrimmage. We'll see what it is. In the first scrimmage, he had 16 points. He hit 2 out of 4 3-pointers. He had 5 rebounds, 6 of 11 field goals overall. A really great job finishing through contact. I saw him attacking the basket against NBA prospects and able to finish through contact, finish at the rim. Really did a nice job of that kind of stuff. Now, you talked about point guard stuff. He only had 1 assist. He had 4 turnovers. If the NBA wants a point guard, I'm not sure he looked like a point. He looked like a guy who can score. He did not look like a guy who is going to distribute a lot. His handle was a little bit shaky at times. It is worth noting, everyone who watched his scrimmage said he played really nice defense. Again, part of the book on him at Wisconsin had been that his defense wasn't that great, and a lot of people said that's one of the things that he's going to have to fix at Duke. One of the reasons coming to Duke is that one of the best defensive teams in the country, and that Duke will school you in that kind of stuff. Well, John Blackwell sort of showing already. I've got the skills to move my feet, to use my body and my physicality. Even though I've got a short wingspan, to use my wingspan as best as I can to play good defense, because his defense looked very good in that first scrimmage. I don't want to give anyone the impression that coming out of that scrimmage, scoring 16 points fairly efficiently and attacking the basket really well, that NBA scouts are suddenly like, oh my God, John Blackwell, let's put all this in context. I think the context is probably still that John Blackwell is a stretch to be drafted. If he stays in the draft, he would, maybe be a guy that teams look at the very, very end of the second round, maybe. And Donald, let's be very, very clear. The money he would get at Duke would be multiples of what, if he got drafted, it would be multiples of what he would make. And by multiples, I mean probably 4 to 6 times, maybe 7 or 8 times what he would make on an NBA two-way contract. That's just the reality. And I don't think anything that's happened at the Combine has changed that math in any way. And so I think I know John Blackwell is there to find out things and to talk to NBA scouts and and learn what his NBA stock is like and what they need to hear, what they need to find from him. I don't think that anything has changed in terms of whether or not he will spend next year at Duke University. I'd say it's almost a certainty at this point.
All that to say, this is not Cedric Coward. So this is not a Cedric Coward situation. We anticipate that after this week, we will see John Blackwell officially say, "Yes, I'm coming back to Duke. I had fun during the draft process and got a lot of information. I know what I need to work on, and I'm going to do that at Duke." So, I
Look,
don't
and
think
how great is it that he's able to test himself against NBA prospects? I mean, of course,
right.
Why wouldn't you do this?
And that's the point, right? Like, that's what this draft combine is about. Now, some people are going to make the wrong decision. Some people are going to say, you know what, I still think I can do it. We just don't think that John Blackwell is going to be one of those players that thinks that he's going to be a first round pick because, you know, at the end of the day, he's going to get this draft process. He's going to get the information. And now he has that information. He's going to be able to figure out how to be the best player he can be, but at Duke. So I'm really looking forward to that.
We should note there are a couple other guys. There are some guys with some really big decisions, much more difficult decisions than John Blackwell at the NBA Combine. One of them, who I think could have a pretty significant impact upon the ACC, is Matt Abel. He played last year at NC State. He only averaged about 8.5 points per game at NC State, but he showed a lot of athleticism, a lot of potential. The portal opened. He went into the portal and he moved on to UNC. So he's still in the ACC. Matt Abel is someone that Carolina, I think, is expecting to be one of their best players on their team next year. And he is at the Combine, and it is not nearly the same kind of decision that John Blackwell has in terms of, you know, should I stay or should I go? Matt Abel has also, by the way, Matt Abel performed way better in terms of measurables and things like that and the shooting drills and the such than John Blackwell did. At the Combine, especially the measurables. His measurables came out and people are like, yeah, that's a guy who looks like an NBA prospect. And then in the scrimmages, Matt Abel has looked really, really good. He had 16 points in one game. I want to say 17 in the other game. Been one of the leading scorers of everyone playing in the scrimmages. Now, again, the scrimmages are not the top guys at the Combine, but he's looked like one of the best guys in the scrimmages. And Matt Abel's got a tough choice. I think he could be a first rounder, but might not be a first rounder. Probably. I think Matt Abel probably at this point knows that he would get a guaranteed NBA contract because I don't think there's any way if Matt Abel stays in the draft that he goes outside of the first maybe 10 picks or so of the second round. And those guys are probably getting guaranteed contracts. This is a really, really consequential decision for UNC. Carolina, if Matt Abel stays in the draft, Carolina will not be able to find someone as good as him to fill that spot on their roster for next year. So this is a big deal.
First of all, can we talk about the fact very quickly that Matt Abel, first of all, is the player to be named later in the Vin Allen Lubin trade from last year. So they've completed that trade. That's all said and done. Everybody's happy. But when they were asking Matt Abel about his decision, he was like, "Well, you know, I love UNC, and I all that's weighing on me as I make the decision." And everybody's like, "How do you love UNC? You have not been there yet. You have not played a second in that stupid jersey yet." So you don't have to do all that. You could just say, "Hey, I have a tough decision about what I need to do," but you don't need to start with a, I love UNC. It's my heart and soul type of soliloquy. Just tell us that you're having a tough decision about what you're going to do. So I thought that was very funny, but I think you're right. If he decides to stay in the draft, it'll be too late for UNC to find somebody that will, come close to matching what he can provide. And we saw him for NC State last year. I mean, he's a very, very good player. And I think he was also, because of how UNC's offseason has gone, he's kind of viewed as the crown jewel of their transfer portal season. So for him to stay in the draft would be a major blow to Malone's first season plans.
Yeah, and over the next week or so, there are a lot of these guys who have interesting decisions to make. Alan Graves, who Duke was very involved with for a while, has an interesting decision to make. I think he's probably going to stay in the draft. He's probably a first rounder. And by the way, even though people are still saying, Duke's not involved with Alan Graves anymore. We got Boom Boom, and we moved on from Alan Graves because we didn't want a situation with a guy who is probably going to stay in the draft. Milan Momcilovic, one of the best shooter in all of college basketball last year. He can't decide what he's going to do. He's another guy who, probably maybe gets there at the end of the first round, but does he go to college instead and make a lot of money in college? there are a bunch of other guys who have decisions to make. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next week or so, but it will impact the decisions these guys make will impact some of the top teams in college basketball. We just have to see what guys end up deciding.
And I mean, I think just for a lot of these guys, right? This is already the smallest class of early entrants into the NBA draft since 2003. It's exponentially smaller. I think it's only 90 something guys that are considered early entrants declared for the draft. And so I'm
no, it was 70 something. It was 70 something.
Sorry, 70 something. Yeah, it was like, it's down from like 90. I think it was 90 back in 2003. We had a couple years ago, it was like 300. But again, that's how NIL's kind of changed things. And I think it's going to change things even further, where some of these guys who might have said, you know what, I'm going to stick it on the draft. And if not, I'll make it through the summer league. And if not, I'll make it through the G League, whatever. Now they're like, I could take this guaranteed $2 million over here for the season. And really, at least I'll have that. And a team actually wants me, and I'll stay in college and figure that out. That's a question I think a lot of these guys are going to figure out over the next couple of days, especially as they get the feedback from NBA teams on how they did this week at the Combine. Last word to you, Jace, before we get out here.
Yeah, my last word is if you're listening to this podcast, you're part of the Duke media world, and you are not alone. Dave Bradley, the voice of the Blue Devils, went ahead and sent out a thing on social media. He got his hands on the national TV viewing ratings, the number of minutes people watched various basketball teams over the past 2 seasons. The Duke Blue Devils were watched a total of 22.86 billion minutes. That's a big number. 22.9 billion minutes of Duke basketball was viewed on television over the past 2 seasons. And Dave Bradley pointed out, hey, I've got the numbers for the rest of the ACC. Second place to Duke was UNC. Again, Duke, 22.3 billion. UNC, 8.7 billion. Third place was Louisville at 5.5, then Clemson at 2.9, just under 3. I'll do some math for you, folks. If you combine the schools behind Duke, the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, put them together, combine them together, they still don't even really come that close to matching the number of minutes of Duke basketball that was viewed over the past 2 seasons. And Donald, I'll bet you this. I don't have all the numbers. I can't tell what all the numbers are. If you extracted games against Duke, like when UNC plays Duke, when Louisville plays Duke, when Boston College plays Duke, if you extracted that and replaced those games with an average for that team, so when Carolina plays Duke, you go, no, wait, we're not counting because there's a Duke effect here. We're going to take an average UNC game to replace that. And you combined every single team in the ACC. My bet is that Duke is watched more often, or more minutes, I should say, than every team in the ACC combined. I wouldn't be shocked if that was the result of this, because again, every one of these teams is getting a boost by playing Duke. I'm saying take out that boost, give them just an average game instead, and you combine all their other games. I bet Duke is viewed more than the rest of the ACC combined when it comes to basketball. We've talked about this Amazon deal. We've talked many, many times in this podcast. I'm going to say something here, and anyone who disputes me is an idiot. The Duke Blue Devils are the biggest brand in college basketball. Period. End of story. End of discussion. And it ain't close. Done.
It's fair. Maybe that's why Fox is tripping over the Michigan game, because they're like, "Oh, we want those eyeballs." Like we saw. I mean, the
we
Michigan
want Duke.
Game,
we need Duke. Yeah.
The Michigan game, or the Duke Michigan game that was here this year, that was on ESPN, was I think that was the most watched college basketball game this season, and I think it was one of the largest non-tournament games that had ever been watched on ESPN's network. So Fox is like, "Yeah, bring that right over here," and Amazon was like, "Nope, not going to do it." So. If we hear more about that, we'll let you know. But it's very clear. Everyone wants Duke on television because they know people will watch, just like all of us, you listening to my voice and Jason's voice, and all of you out there who are Duke fans. So we'll leave it here on this episode of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We'll be back very, very soon if there's any news. And I know as we get closer to the NBA draft, Jason and I are going to start kind of preparing for that. But until then, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. You can email us your questions there. Maybe if you have some good questions, we will do a mailbag of some sort down the line. But until then, he's Jason. I'm Donald. It's now time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.